The great doors to the Concord chamber slid open without a sound. Ambassador Li Jun took a quiet breath and stepped through. The air itself felt heavy here, thick with the smells of 100 different worlds. Some were sharp like ozone, others were sweet like decaying flowers. The light was a soft, golden glow, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Behind him, his aide, Kim Yuna, followed. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the vast room. It was filled with beings of every shape and size. There were tall, insect-like creatures with clicking mandibles. There were floating orbs of light that hummed with energy. And there were hulking, reptilian figures with scales the color of dried blood. These were the Cthar. They watched June and Yuna with cold, unblinking eyes. Today was a big day. After many years of tests and talks, humanity was being officially welcomed into the Galactic Concord. It was an alliance of species that had been around for thousands of years. For Earth, it was a dream come true. It was a chance to learn, to share, and to find a place among the stars. But as June walked towards the central platform, he could feel the weight of their stares. It was not a friendly welcome. It was a judgment. He saw many of the aliens look at his simple gray suit, at Yuna's datapad, and then look away, bored. They saw humans as weak, new, unimportant. A tall, slender being with blue skin and large, dark eyes gestured for June to stand on a glowing circle. This was the Zell, the formal hosts of the Concord. Their voice was like music. We gather to welcome a new voice to our great chorus. The species known as humanity from the world they call Earth is granted full membership into the Galactic Concord. There was a polite sound from the crowd. It was the sound of hands clapping, or claws tapping, or wings rustling. It was not enthusiastic. June began his prepared speech. His voice was calm and clear. On behalf of all the people of Earth, we thank you. We come in a spirit of peace and cooperation. We hope to learn from your ancient wisdom and, in time, to offer our own. As he spoke, his eyes moved across the crowd. The Cthar delegates were not even pretending to listen. One of them, a massive warrior with a scar across his snout, leaned over and said something to his companion. They both made a low, rumbling sound that was clearly a laugh. June finished his speech. The Zell ambassador thanked him. The ceremony was over. The crowd began to break up into small groups, talking in their own languages. Yuna moved to June's side. They barely listened, she whispered, a hint of frustration in her voice. It is what we expected, June replied quietly. They see a species that has not fought in a galaxy-wide war. They see we value art and science. They mistake our desire for peace for weakness. As they stood there, feeling isolated in the crowded room, a smaller door opened to their right. A being emerged, moving slowly. It was one of the elders. They were the oldest species in the Concord, the ones who had built it. They looked like large, wise slugs, their bodies covered in a soft, wrinkled skin. They moved on a cushion of air, their large, liquid black eyes holding a deep, ancient intelligence. This particular elder glided directly towards them. The chatter in the room seemed to quieten just a little. Everyone watched the elder with respect, and some with fear. The elder stopped before June and Yuna. It did not speak out loud. Instead, a voice appeared directly in their minds. It was a dry, rustling sound, like leaves blowing across stone. Ambassador Li Jun.
Ed Kim Yuna.
Your world is very green. It reminds me of my own, long ago. June bowed his head slightly. Thank you, elder. We are proud of our home. You gave a good speech. The elder's voice whispered in their heads. The right words, but words are air. They listen to other things. Yuna glanced at June, then back at the elder. What do they listen to, honored one? They listen to the sound of power. They look for the shadow of a weapon. They count the wars a species has won. The elder's large eyes seemed to swallow the light. Your file in our archives is incomplete. June felt a chill. Incomplete? How so? Your profile lacks a key metric, a final rating. The others, like the Cthar, the elder's thought drifted towards the reptilian group, They see a lack of claws and assume a lack of teeth. They see you have not made war on us, so they think you cannot. This is a foolish mistake." The elder paused, and the silence in their minds felt heavy. "We are not so foolish. We have studied your world. We have seen the bones of your history. We know what grows in the soil of a planet that has survived so many of its own extinctions. Do not let them force you to bare your teeth. For your sake, and for theirs." With that, the elder turned and glided away, leaving June and Yuna standing in silence. The warning was clear. The elders knew something about humanity that the others had missed. They knew that humans were dangerous. Later, in the human embassy quarters, June stared out the window at the stars. "What did it mean, bare our teeth?" Yuna asked, handing him a cup of tea. "He meant our capacity for war," June said, his voice low. "The Cthar think they are the strongest warriors. They believe their claws and plasma cannons are the ultimate weapons. The elder was saying that our hidden strength, the war-making power we have not shown them, is something else entirely. Something they cannot understand." "But we don't want a war," Yuna said. "Of course we don't," June agreed. "But there is a saying from old Earth. Speak softly, but carry a big stick. We have been speaking softly. The elder is warning us that the other kids in the playground have noticed we have a big stick, and they are getting curious. They want to see if it's real." He turned from the window, his face serious. "They are going to test us, Yuna. The Cthar will find a reason. A border dispute. A claim on one of our colonies. They will push us to see if we push back. To see if we have teeth. And if we do?" she asked. June looked tired. "Then we will have proven the elders right. And we will have shown the galaxy that the gentle newcomers are the most terrifying monsters they have ever met." The peace of the moment was broken by a soft chime from Yuna's datapad. She looked at it, and her face fell. A message from the frontier. "The Cthar have moved a battle group near the colony on Eden's Grasp. They are calling it a routine patrol." June closed his eyes. It was starting. The provocation had begun. The elders had warned them. Now they could only wait and see how far the Cthar would go. The message from Eden's Grasp was not a gentle chime this time. It was a sharp, repeating alarm that cut through the quiet of the human embassy. Kim Yuna was at her desk in an instant, her fingers flying across the screen. The words that came up made her blood run cold. "Ambassador," she said, her voice tight. "It's a Priority 1 alert. The Cthar have moved from a patrol. They've established a full blockade around Eden's Grasp. No ships are allowed in or out." Lee Jun walked over, his face a mask of calm, but his eyes were hard. He read the report. The Cthar had positioned 3 of their warships in high orbit around the colony planet. Their justification was a lie so bold it was almost an insult in itself. They claimed that the human settlement was built on a sacred Cthar burial ground, a site of great spiritual importance that they had somehow forgotten to mention for the entire decade the colony had existed. "They are not even trying to be clever," June murmured. "This is a test. A very direct one." He knew what would happen next. The Concord Council would be summoned for an emergency session. It was the proper channel, the civilized way to handle disputes. But he also knew that the Cthar were counting on the Council's slow, bureaucratic nature. They wanted to see how humans reacted under pressure. Would we follow the rules? Or would we show our true colors? Hours later, June stood in the same circular chamber where humanity had been welcomed. The mood was now very different. The golden light felt hostile, and the air was thick with tension. The Zell ambassador presided. "We are gathered to address the claim of the Cthar people against the human colony on Eden's Grasp." The Cthar ambassador, a large reptile named Gorlon, rose. His voice was a guttural growl. "The humans have desecrated a holy site. Their very presence is a stain upon the memory of our ancestors. The blockade is a peaceful measure to protect this sacred ground until the humans agree to leave." June stood. He kept his voice level and reasonable. "Ambassador Gorlon, the first surveys of Eden's Grasp showed no signs of any prior civilization. There are no structures, no artifacts, no energy signatures. Your people have never filed any claim to this world in the Concord archives. This sacred ground appears to have become sacred only after we built a successful farming colony there. A few of the other delegates shifted. They could see the weakness in the Cthar claim, but none of them spoke up. The Cthar were powerful, and no one wanted to make an enemy of them. Gorlon sneered, showing his sharp teeth. Our ways are not your ways, human. Our connection to the land is spiritual. It is not written in your cold metal machines. We do not need to file a claim. The ground knows we are its children. The debate went in circles. June presented facts and logic. Gorlon presented bluster and threats. The council, fearful of the Cthar, proposed committees. They suggested further investigation. They talked about sending neutral observers. It was a dance of delay, and everyone in the room knew it. The Cthar blockade would remain in place, slowly strangling the human colony, while the Concord talked. Gorlon finally grew tired of the game. He turned and looked directly at June, his eyes glowing with contempt. Enough of this talking. The humans cry about their colony. They say they are strong, so let them prove it. His voice dropped to a menacing rumble. Let them try to break the blockade. Let us see the strength of these mighty humans. The challenge hung in the air, a silent dare. June felt every eye in the room on him. If he accepted the challenge, it would mean war. If he did not, humanity would be labeled as weak and cowardly, and the Cthar would be emboldened to take more. June looked at Gorlon, his own face expressionless. Humanity believes in the rule of law, Ambassador. We will follow the procedures of the Concord. He sat down, a calm move that hid the storm inside him. He had not taken the bait, but he knew the game was not over. The Cthar had just made their move in public. Now it was humanity's turn. Back in the embassy, the mood was grim. Yuna was reading reports from Eden's grasp. The colony leader, Mr. Park Jean, reports that they have enough food for 3 weeks, maybe 4 if they ration strictly. Medical supplies are a bigger concern. They have sick and injured who need treatment now. June nodded. He had already sent a tight beam communication to Earth. He had spoken to the Secretary General and the members of the Unified Earth Command. The decision had been made quickly. There would be no more committees. The First Sol Response Fleet has been dispatched, June told Yuna. Admiral Park Min is in command. Yuna knew the name. Admiral Park Min was a legend. He was a quiet, serious man who had never lost a simulation or a real engagement. He was the perfect choice. Calm, professional, and utterly dependable. What are his orders? She asked. June looked out the window at the stars. To break the blockade, to protect human lives, and to avoid firing the first shot. Yuna understood. They were going to push back, but they were going to do it by the book. They would give the Cthar every chance to stand down. They would show the galaxy that humans were reasonable even when provoked. But she also remembered the Elder's warning. Do not let them force you to bare your teeth. She had a cold feeling that the Cthar would not simply back down. They wanted a fight. They were determined to see the teeth. Far from the politics of the Citadel, the First Sol Response Fleet slid out of slipspace near Eden's grasp. The planet was a beautiful green and blue marble, but its orbit was marred by the 3 jagged, dark metal Cthar dreadnoughts. They were intimidating ships, covered in weapon ports and spikes, designed to look fearsome. On the bridge of the flagship, the UNS Resolute, Admiral Park Min observed the enemy formation. He was a man in his late 50s, with short gray hair and a face that showed little emotion. He did not see the ships as monsters. He saw them as tactical problems. They are in a standard blockade triangle, his tactical officer, Commander Lee Hanna, reported. Their shields are active. Weapons are powered, but not targeted. Park Min nodded. Open a channel to the lead Cthar vessel. Use the standard Concord hailing frequency. A moment later, the main screen flickered to life. The face that appeared was the same scarred Cthar commander from the welcome ceremony, Vorlak. He was on the bridge of his ship, a brutal-looking place with dark red lighting. Cthar vessel, Park Min said, his voice flat and professional. This is Admiral Park Min of the United Earthship Resolute. You are in violation of Concord law by blockading a sovereign colony. You will power down your weapons and withdraw immediately. Vorlak let out a low, grating laugh. Or what, human? You will throw rocks at us? Your little ships are like insects next to mine. Leave this space. This world belongs to the Kthar. The Concord Council is reviewing the claim, Park Min replied, not rising to the insult. Until they make a ruling, you have no legal right to be here. Withdraw, or we will be forced to escort you from the area. This was the critical moment. Park Min had drawn a line. He had not fired, but he had declared his intention to act. He was giving Vorlak a choice. Back down and save face, or escalate. On his screen. Vorlak's sneer widened. He turned his head and barked an order to someone off-screen. He did not break the communication link. He wanted the humans to see what happened next. Admiral, Hannah said, her voice tense, one of the dreadnoughts is shifting its position. It's bringing a forward plasma battery to bear. Park Min's eyes narrowed. Target? Are they aiming at us? Hannah checked her screen. No, sir. The trajectory. It's not aimed at any of our ships. It's aimed at the planet's surface. A cold dread settled over the bridge of the Resolute. They were not going to shoot at the fleet. That would be an act of war the Concord could not ignore. They were going to shoot at the colony. A warning shot. A calculated act of terror to make the humans run. Get me a projection on that target. Now, Park Min ordered, his voice sharp for the first time on the view screen. Vorlak looked directly at the camera. His eyes filled with vicious pride. He was about to teach the upstart humans a lesson. He was about to show them their place. He had no idea that he was not just aiming a weapon at a building. He was aiming a spark at a powder keg. And he was about to learn why the elders had warned them never to provoke humanity. The bridge of the UNS Resolute was suddenly very quiet. The only sounds were the soft beeps of consoles and the low hum of the ship's engines. Everyone was watching the main screen, where the Kthar commander, Vorlak, smirked at them. He had given the order to fire on the colony. Target lock confirmed, Commander Hannah said, her voice tight. It's a plasma lance. A single shot. They're aiming for the primary communications array on the surface. Admiral Park Min stood perfectly still. His hands were clasped behind his back. A warning shot. That's what the Kthar would call it. A show of force. A way to prove their dominance without officially attacking the human fleet. It was a bully's move. Time to impact. Park Min asked, his voice dangerously calm. 20 seconds, Hannah replied. The array is on the edge of the main settlement. It's a tall tower, mostly metal. Minimal collateral damage predicted. On the screen, Vorlak's grin was a terrifying thing. He was enjoying this. He thought he was in complete control. 15 seconds. Park Min's mind raced. He could not fire on the Kthar ship. That would start a full-scale battle, and he would be blamed for firing the first shot. His orders were clear. Protect human lives, but do not fire first. He was trapped by the rules of engagement. 10 seconds. A new alert chimed on Hannah's console. Her face, which had been focused, suddenly went pale. Admiral, the scans. Our initial surface scan was incomplete. The colony has expanded since our last maps. What is it, Commander? Park Min asked, his eyes still fixed on Vorlak's smug face. The communications array. It's attached to a larger structure. A dome. Our sensors didn't pick up its composition before because it's made from local organic materials. It blends in with the forest. 5 seconds. What is the structure, Hannah? Park Min's voice was a low command. Hannah looked up, her eyes wide with horror. It's the school, sir. The colony's primary school. The children. They would be in there for their afternoon lessons. The world seemed to slow down. On the main screen, a brilliant lance of green energy shot out from the Kthar dreadnought. It streaked across the blackness of space and pierced the atmosphere of Eden's grasp. It moved in a perfectly straight line towards the communications tower. Admiral Park Min, a father of 2 young girls back on Earth, could only watch. The plasma bolt hit its target with perfect accuracy. The communications tower vaporized instantly in a flash of white light. But the energy of the blast did not stop there. It bled outwards, washing over the organic dome of the school that stood right next to it. The dome, made of woven wood and a clear resin, offered no protection. It disappeared as if it were made of paper. The white light consumed it. For a moment, there was only the silent, expanding fireball on the view screen. Then, the audio feed from the planet's public emergency channel, which had automatically activated, filled the bridge of the Resolute.it. Was not the sound of static. It was not the sound of alarms. It was the sound of screaming. High-pitched, terrified, young screams. The sound of children. The sound lasted for 3 seconds. Then it cut off into absolute silence. The silence on the bridge was heavier than any sound could ever be. The officers stared at their screens, frozen. Some had their hands over their mouths. Others had tears in their eyes. They had just heard children die. Commander Hannah slowly turned to look at Admiral Park Min. Her face was wet with tears. Park Min had not moved. He was still standing in the same position, his hands behind his back. But he was a different man. The calm, professional admiral was gone. In his place was something cold and hard. He slowly turned from the view screen. His face was like stone. His eyes, which usually held a quiet intelligence, now held a deep, burning fire. He looked at the image of Vorlak, who was still on the screen. The Kthar commander was laughing, pleased with his perfect shot. Park Min's voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet. It was not a shout. It was a whisper that carried across the dead-quiet bridge and filled every corner of the room. It was the most terrifying sound any of them had ever heard. They have just made the worst mistake in their species' history. He walked to his command chair and pressed a single button on the armrest. It was a secure, encrypted channel that connected directly to Earth Command and to every ship in the human fleet. He spoke one word into the silence. His voice was flat and final. Aegis. On the main screen, Vorlak's laughter stopped. He had heard the word. He didn't understand it, but the tone in the human admiral's voice sent a shiver down his spine. The connection was cut from the human side. The screen went dark. On the bridge of the Kthar flagship, Vorlak felt a moment of unease. The humans were not reacting as he had expected. There was no panic, no frantic calls for surrender. There was only that cold, quiet voice and a single, strange word. Aegis? He muttered to his second-in-command. What does that mean? Before his officer could answer, a new alert blared through their ship. It was a sound they rarely heard. It was the sound of their long-range sensors detecting a massive energy signature. But it was not coming from the small human fleet in front of them. It was coming from everywhere else. From the dark space behind the moon of Eden's grasp, new ships began to appear. They did not slide out of slipspace with a flash of light. They seemed to simply emerge from the shadows, as if they had been there all along. They were not like the blocky, functional ships of the First Sol Fleet. These ships were sleek and black, their shapes jagged and unpredictable. They had no bright lights or visible weapon ports. They looked like silent predators. More and more of them appeared, dozens of them. They moved without sound, forming a perfect, terrifying circle around the 3 Kthar dreadnoughts on the Resolute. Admiral Park Min finally sat down in his command chair. He looked at the tactical display, which now showed the new fleet in green. The Aegis fleet, humanity's big stick, the one they had never wanted to use. The Aegis fleet is online and under your command, Admiral, Hannah reported, her voice shaking slightly. Park Min nodded. He looked at the image of the Kthar ships on his screen. He looked at the ship that had just murdered children. His orders had been to avoid firing the first shot. The Kthar had just fired it. They had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The rules were gone now. Target the lead dreadnought, Park Min said, his voice still quiet, but now filled with a terrible purpose. Disable its engines and weapons. Leave its life support and comms array intact. He paused, his eyes cold. I want them to see what comes next. I want them to be able to call for help and tell the story. I want the entire galaxy to hear it. The word Aegis was not just a code. It was a key. It unlocked a part of humanity that had been carefully hidden away. On Earth, in secret command centers buried deep under mountains, a new kind of soldier took their posts. In the asteroid belt, hidden shipyards that looked like worthless rocks opened their doors. The weapons that came out were not designed for parades or to look impressive. They were designed for one thing only: to end a threat completely and forever. The new ships that emerged around the Cthar fleet were like ghosts. They were painted a black so dark it seemed to drink the light from the stars. Their shapes were strange, with sharp angles that made the eye slide off them. They made no sound. They showed no energy signatures. To the Cthar sensors, it was like trying to see a shadow in a dark room. On the bridge of his dreadnought, Vorlak felt a fear he had never known. His tactical screen was a mess. The computers could barely track the new ships. They flickered in and out of existence. "What are they?" he roared at his crew. "Target them. Fire at will." A Cthar gunner tried to lock onto the closest black ship. As soon as he had a lock, the ship vanished from his screen. A second later, a warning alarm blared. The ship had reappeared a few kilometers away, in a blind spot. Then, the human admiral's voice came over the general comm channel. It was the same cold, calm voice from before.
Keita Commander for LAK.
"You have committed an act of war against a civilian target. You have murdered human children. Power down your weapons and surrender your vessels immediately." Vorlak was too proud and too frightened to surrender. "Never. Cthar do not surrender to vermin. All ships open fire. Destroy them." The 3 Cthar dreadnoughts unleashed their full power. Bright green plasma bolts and powerful laser beams shot out, lighting up the dark space. They looked magnificent and powerful. And they hit nothing. The black human ships moved like they knew the future. They slid between the blasts of energy. They were too fast, too agile. It was like trying to shoot a swarm of flies with a cannon. Then, the humans fired back. There was no bright light, no loud noise. There was only a series of quiet, solid thumps that vibrated through the hull of Vorlak's ship. "Report." "What was that?" he yelled. "Hyperkinetic projectiles." "Commander," an officer shouted. "They are firing solid metal rods. Our shields do nothing." The Cthar shields were designed to stop energy weapons. They could deflect plasma and lasers, but a giant rod of tungsten metal, fired at a fraction of the speed of light, went through the shields like they weren't there. It went through the hull armor like it was paper. The first rod hit the engine room of one of the other dreadnoughts. It did not explode. It just punched a clean hole straight through the entire ship, tearing apart everything in its path. The ship immediately lost power and started to drift, a dead piece of metal. The second volley of rods targeted weapon systems. One by one, the giant plasma cannons on the Cthar ships were smashed into silent scrap. Vorlak's ship shook violently. Red lights flashed across his bridge. "We have lost main power. Life support is failing. They have taken out our primary and secondary weapons." He stared at his screens in disbelief. His mighty dreadnought, the pride of the Cthar fleet, had been made helpless in less than a minute. They had not even scratched a single human ship. But the humans were not done. New alerts screamed through the ship. "Commander, we are being boarded." "Boarded? How?" "There are no docking clamps." Small, pod-like objects had attached themselves to the hull of the dreadnought. They did not blast their way in. Instead, they used a molecular disassembler. They simply melted a perfect, silent hole in the hull and swarmed inside. They were not human soldiers. They were robots. They were low to the ground, with multiple legs like spiders. They moved with a terrible, swift purpose. They did not carry guns that fired bullets. They carried tools. The Cthar warriors who met them fired their plasma rifles. The robots were hit, but they did not stop. Their black shells absorbed the energy. They moved forward, and their tools came to life. One tool emitted a high-pitched sound. The Cthar soldiers near it screamed and dropped their weapons, clutching their heads. The sound was disrupting their nervous systems. Another tool released a cloud of microscopic machines, nanites. The cloud settled over a bank of computers. The computer sizzled and then dissolved into dust as the nanites ate the metal and wiring. The robots were not there to kill the crew. They were there to take the ship apart from the inside, to disable it completely. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Park Min watched the tactical display. The 3 Cthar dreadnoughts were now all dark and powerless. They were floating wrecks. The fight was over. "Report," he said. "All 3 enemy vessels are disabled," Commander Hannah said. "Weapons and engines destroyed. Their internal systems are being scrubbed by the Aegis drones. They are no longer a threat. We have suffered 0 casualties. 0 damage." Park Min nodded. It was not a battle. It was a demonstration. A surgical removal of a threat. "Are their communications still active on the lead ship?" he asked. "Yes, sir. As you ordered. Vorlak can still send a signal." "Good." Park Min opened the channel again.
Commander for LAK.
On the Cthar bridge, Vorlak jumped at the sound of the human voice. His ship was dark. The only light came from the emergency strips on the floor. The air was getting cold. He could hear the distant, terrifying sounds of his ship being dismantled by the robot swarm. "Your fleet is destroyed, Commander," Park Min's voice said. It was still calm. It was still cold. "Your ship is dead. Your crew is at our mercy. We are leaving your life pods functional. Use them. Abandon your ship." Vorlak could not believe what he was hearing. They were letting them go. Why? He whispered into the comm. There was a long pause. When the Admiral spoke again, his voice was lower. It was filled with a grief and a rage so deep it was beyond shouting. "So you can bear witness?" Park Min said. "So you can return to your people and you can tell them what you saw here today. You tell them what happens when you provoke humanity. You tell them about the school." The connection closed. Vorlak stood in the dark, cold silence of his bridge. The pride of the Cthar warrior was gone. All that was left was a cold, sick fear. He had wanted to see the humans' teeth. He had seen them. They were not simple fangs and claws. They were something else. Something precise, something silent, and something utterly, terrifyingly merciless. He gave the order to abandon ship as he floated in a life pod away from his ruined dreadnought. He looked back. The black human ships were already leaving, disappearing back into the shadows from which they came. It was as if they had never been there. But the 3 dead dreadnoughts were proof. They were a message, written in cold metal and silence, for the entire galaxy to read. The message was simple. The elders were right. Never provoke the humans. The news traveled across the galaxy faster than any ship. The Cthar survivors sent their desperate calls for help. They told a story that no one could believe. They spoke of a ghost fleet, of weapons that ignored shields, of a defeat so total it was unthinkable. On the Citadel station, the Concord Council was thrown into chaos. Ambassadors shouted over each other. The Cthar ambassador, Gorlan, was the loudest of all. His face was a mask of fury and fear. "This is an act of war," he bellowed, slamming a scaled fist on the table. "The humans have destroyed 3 of our dreadnoughts. They have attacked without mercy. The Concord must respond. We must crush them." The other delegates looked nervous. They had all seen the sensor logs from the battle. Or rather, the lack of a battle. The logs showed the Cthar ships firing wildly. They showed them being systematically taken apart by an unseen enemy. It was not a fight. It was an execution. The chamber doors opened. A silence fell as Ambassador Lee Jun and Kim Yuna walked in. They did not look like conquerors. Jun wore the same simple gray suit. Yuna carried her datapad. But they carried themselves differently. There was a new strength in their posture, a cold certainty in their eyes. The Zell ambassador gestured for order. "Ambassador Jun, you have heard the accusations. How do you answer?" Jun did not look at Gorlan. He looked at the assembled council. He placed a small device on the table. "I will answer with evidence," he said, his voice clear and firm. "This is the sensor log from the UNS Resolute. It begins just before the Cthar fired upon our colony." He pressed a button. The main screen in the chamber lit up. The delegates watched as the Kthar ship targeted the planet. They heard Admiral Park Min's calm warning. They saw Vorlak's sneering face. Then they saw the green plasma lance fire. June paused the recording. A map of the colony appeared on the screen. A red circle highlighted the target. The Kthar claimed they were firing on a military target, June said. A communications array. He zoomed in on the map. The circle expanded to show the building right next to the tower. It was clearly labeled. The delegates saw the word, translated into their own languages, school. A murmur of shock went through the room. June pressed play. The delegates watched the plasma bolt strike. They saw the tower vanish. They saw the energy wash over the school dome, turning it to dust. And then, for 3 terrible seconds, the sound from the emergency channel filled the Grand Council chamber. The sound of children screaming. June stopped the recording. The silence that followed was heavy and sick. Many of the delegates looked down, unable to meet his eyes. The Kthar had not just broken the rules of war. They had broken something much deeper. Gorlan tried to speak. This is a fake, a human trick. No one listened to him. Then June played the second part of the recording, the part showing the human response. The silent, black ships, the Kthar weapons hitting nothing, the precise, brutal dismantling of the dreadnoughts. When it was over, June turned to face the council. The quiet, polite diplomat was gone. In his place stood a man who represented a species that had been pushed too far. "You tested us," he said, his voice low but ringing in the silence. "You provoked the bear, and you found it had fangs of tungsten and claws of nanotech. The elders warned you. Our history, which you so lazily dismissed, warned you." He walked slowly around the table, his eyes moving from one alien face to another. "We are a species who dreamed of peace so fiercely that we prepared for war on a scale you cannot comprehend. We did not want to show you this. You forced our hand. The Kthar did not just attack a colony. They murdered our children. They crossed a line from which there is no return." He stopped and pointed directly at Gorlan, who shrank back in his seat. "The Kthar government has forfeited its right to be a member of this Concord. They are a rogue state, led by butchers. Their territory will now fall under human protection, to ensure this kind of barbarism never happens again." Gorlan jumped to his feet. "You cannot do this. The Concord will never allow it." June finally looked at him. His gaze was like ice. "This is not a request. This is a statement of fact. The Kthar fleet is gone. Your primary shipyards are now being secured by our vessels. Your reign of bullying is over." He turned back to the rest of the council. "The question for the rest of you is simple. Stand with them," he gestured to Gorlan, "and you will share their fate. Or stand with us, and help us build a galaxy where children are safe to go to school." He sat down. The choice was clear. There was no more debate. The vote was called. It was swift. It was unanimous. Every single species, even those who had been allies of the Kthar, voted to expel them from the Concord. They voted to cede Kthar territory to human oversight as reparations for the lives lost at Eden's grasp. They were not voting for humanity. They were voting out of sheer, primal fear. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, the ancient elder glided over to June and Yuna. Its voice rustled in their minds. "You showed them the storm. They will never look at the rain the same way again. You have saved countless lives today by showing your strength. But the fear you have planted today will grow for 1,000 years." June looked at the elder, his face tired. "We did not want to be feared. We only wanted to be left in peace." The elder's large, dark eyes seemed to hold a universe of sadness. "That," the elder whispered in their minds, "is the one thing the universe never allows. Welcome to the top, humanity. It is a very lonely place." The memorial service on Eden's grasp was small and quiet. A simple stone was placed where the school had been. The names of the children were carved into it. The air was clean again, but the silence felt heavy. The colony was safe, but it was a safety that had come at a terrible price. Admiral Park Min stood before the stone. He was not in his uniform. He wore a simple black suit. He looked older than he had on the bridge of his ship. The cold fury was gone from his eyes, replaced by a deep and lasting sorrow. He placed a single white flower on the stone, a gesture from a father who had lost children he never knew. Kim Yuna stood a few steps behind him. She had come down from the citadel to pay her respects. She watched the admiral, this man who had unleashed hell, now standing as still as the stone itself. When he turned, his face was calm, but his eyes were haunted. "It's done," Yuna said softly. "The Kthar government has surrendered. Their military is disbanding. The Concord has given us full authority." Park Min nodded slowly. He looked up at the sky, where the stars were beginning to appear. A new constellation of human ships, both the familiar gray of the Sol Fleet and the silent black of the Aegis Fleet, now patrolled the space above. "They're terrified of us now," Yuna added. "The entire galaxy. They look at our ships and they see monsters." "Good," Park Min replied. His voice was quiet, but firm. "Fear is what they understand. It is the only language bullies speak. Now perhaps they will learn a new word: respect." They began to walk away from the memorial, through the quiet colony. People nodded to them, their faces a mix of gratitude and grief. They had been saved, but they would never be the same. "We did not want this," Yuna said, echoing the words of Ambassador June. "We never wanted to be the galaxy's police. We never wanted this power." Park Min stopped and looked at her. The evening light cast long shadows across his face. "We did not want this crown of thorns," he said. "But now that it is ours, we will wear it. We have a responsibility, not as conquerors, but as guardians." He gestured towards the stars. "The elders were right to fear what we could become. They saw the violence in our history. They saw how good we are at destruction. But that is only one part of who we are." He turned to face Yuna fully. "The same mind that designs a weapon that can silence a starship also designs an engine that can take a child to see another world. The same heart that burns with rage for the lost also aches to build a future for the living. Our duty, the duty of every human that follows, is to ensure that we become something worth fearing for the right reasons." Yuna understood. The galaxy had seen the monster. Now it was humanity's job to show them the guardian. To use their terrifying power not for conquest, but for protection. To make sure that what happened on Eden's Grasp would never, ever happen to anyone else. It would be a harder job than winning the battle. It would take generations. Weeks later, on the edge of what was once Kthar space, a small trading ship from a species called the Tlom suffered a critical engine failure. They were drifting into the gravity well of a star. They sent out a universal distress call, but they held little hope. This was a lonely and dangerous part of space. To their astonishment, a response came within minutes. It was a human voice, calm and professional. "Tlom vessel, this is the United Earthship Guardian. We have you on our scanners. Your trajectory is critical. Stand by for a tow." From the darkness, a ship emerged. It was one of the new, black Aegis ships. The Tlom crew froze in terror. They had heard the stories. They expected to be dismantled. Instead, the human ship deployed a gentle tractor beam. It locked onto their hull and pulled them away from the star to a safe distance. Then, a smaller shuttle detached from the human ship and docked with them. A human engineer in a simple jumpsuit came aboard. He did not carry a weapon. He carried a toolbox. "Your primary coolant line is ruptured," the human said, his voice friendly. "It's a common flaw in this model. We can patch it for you, enough to get you to the next station." The Tlom captain could only stare. Why are you helping us?" The human engineer looked surprised. "You needed help," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "This is a dangerous lane. It's our job to keep it safe." As the engineer worked, the Tlom captain looked out the viewport. The black human ship hung in the void, its sharp angles silhouetted against the nebula. It was the same ship that had destroyed the Kthar fleet, the same ship that the entire galaxy feared. But now it was just standing guard, protecting them. When the engineer was done, he packed his tools. "You're all set. Safe travels." The news of the rescue spread. First, no one believed it. It was a trick, they said, a lie. But then another story came. A human medical frigate had answered a plague outbreak on a neutral world, delivering vaccines and doctors. Then another story of a human patrol ship chasing off a gang of pirates that had been terrorizing a shipping route. Slowly, the story began to change. The galaxy had learned that if you provoked humanity, they would show you a nightmare. But they were also learning that if you lived in peace, humanity would show you a different side. A side that built and healed and protected. On the bridge of the UNS Resolute, now assigned to patrol the new borders, Admiral Park Min received the report about the Tlom rescue. A small, sad smile touched his lips for the first time in a long time. It was a start. He looked out at the stars, at the vast, quiet responsibility that now lay on humanity's shoulders. The elders had been right to warn them, but they had been wrong about one thing. The top didn't have to be a lonely place. Could be a watchtower. And from that watchtower, humanity would keep its vigil. They would be the guardians they had never asked to be, ensuring that the peace they had won through terror would be maintained through strength, and one day, perhaps, through trust.